All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, up there in New York City.
Yes.
Fangraphs Jon Tayler, as he fights laughing every time
it just automatically makes me think of Matt Berry saying it, and there are few things as reliably funny as that.
It's amazing that he's the bit and all of that stuff it's still working. We're on season 5 of that show?
Season 4.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's still just as funny as it was from the first moment.
100%. 100%, folks. Go check it out. Free ad for Hulu and FX. Just go watch what we do in the shadows. It's always a good time.
Yes, always. If you need a quick, easy, dumb laugh, it's probably the best show on TV at doing that.
It's also just the boldness of turning Colin Robinson into a baby. A lot of shows do not turn their probably funniest character, right? I don't know. For me, he's the funniest.
That's tough.
He's one of them. Either way, he's a big figure. He's a big funny figure on the show. And to just be like, we're turning him into a baby for a full season, and that's just what we're doing. And then it just not missing a beat is
it somehow works and also gets dumber than you'd think it would, which is really something.
The episode of him going to the office is still one of my favorite television episodes of all time.
The one with him and Vanessa Bayer together. Yes. Is that the same one?
Yes, where they're both.
Yeah. They're both energy vampires.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, there's nothing like it.
That is a very enjoyable 22 minutes of television. I really love in the season 2 premiere when he summons the ghost of his grandmother just to do an updog joke on her. That was very special stuff.
Mm-hmm. It was. The show is just special. So go check that out. And Guillermo, get back to work. Jon Tayler.
Gizmo. Yes.
Speaking of getting back to work, Major League Baseball got back to work this past week in terms of robot umps are now coming to all of AAA this year, John. Now that you've had a couple days to think about it, what are your thoughts on AAA now going full robot umps in 2023?
So, what I find interesting about it is it's something MLB's doing that every team should be pissed off about. Because, to me at least, what we've learned about the automatic balls and strike system as it exists so far that MLB has used throughout both the Atlantic League and then into the low minors is that it's not bad. It's not some disaster. I don't think anyway, but that it's not exactly. Well, it's not exactly clear if it's necessarily any better than the system that already exists. Which, on the one hand, I guess is kind of setting a low bar because there are plenty of umpires who they at least once a night, probably closer to 5 to 10. There will be a balls or strike call where you just kind of throw your hands up and go, what are you even seeing there? But for the most part, most umpires are pretty good at this, and most of those missed calls. Consider what most of the missed calls you see are, right? They're not the ones that are so blatant where it's like a ball goes right down the middle of the plate and it gets called a ball, unless like for some reason CB Buckner, Angel Hernandez is working the plate. More often than not, the umpire you get is going to call pretty much all the obvious calls, right? It's going to be the borderline stuff that ends up causing the most controversy. Is an automatic ball and strike system going to be necessarily any better at that? What happens with, some of this is not knowing the specific details of how it works, but I'm curious, like, how can you determine a ball at the very corner of the strike zone, like one of those very, not standard, but like one of those on the black fastballs that clips the outside of the strike zone? What percentage of the ball, what portion of the ball needs to be in the mathematically defined strike zone that ABS uses for it to be a strike or a ball? And that's something where we have, there aren't many major leaguers who've had that much experience with it, but there are a few that have, did rehab in the minors last year. One of them was Chris Bryant, and he said something kind of similar, which is this gray area, the borderline calls, like, how do we know that the robot's really essentially any better at that than the umpire? Like, what is the determining criteria there? And in that case, is it 51% of the ball, 66% of the ball, a full 100% of the ball? If any portion of that ball is not in the strike zone, is it on the one hand, this kind of starts to sound like a kind of stoned, like, philosophical discussion in, like, a dorm room. But on the other hand, this is stuff that, like, I don't know how you essentially program that. I don't know how you figure out a system to deal with the fact that baseball doesn't have hard edges on stuff. That, you know, there are hard dimensions and hard measurements in terms of, you know, this many feet between the bases, you know, this many feet between the home plate and the mound. But on the other hand, you could do pretty much whatever you want in the outfield. One outfield is 37 feet tall. And, like, that's not to say that's exactly the same as on, but, like, I don't know how you take into account the fact that baseball has these kinds of vague spaces and quirks and, you know, that it isn't this hyper rigid thing, you know? I don't know. And I think part of what makes umpires feel, and I don't know about you, but I, excuse me, whenever I think about, you know, yeah, it would be nice if umpires were better at this, but then I also think about but then for some reason I still hold on to the idea of wanting an umpire. I think there's just something kind of integral to a game played by human beings being monitored and judged by a game, or by human beings in a sense. You know, the replay review is one thing, and I think that's genuinely a good idea, even if I don't think the league has executed it all that well sometimes. And I understand that automated balls and strikes, at least half of AAA next year, is also going to be equipped with a challenge system similar to the one that they use in tennis with Hawkeye, I think it's called. That, you know, the thing that pops up, the graphic that pops up on the screen in a tennis match when someone challenges an in or out call, and then shows, you know, the ball is either in or out depending on whatever exactly the rule in tennis. And I'm sure that whatever the rule in tennis, you know, that is for in and out is probably going to be similar to what the automated strike zone would look like anyway. But all of which is to say, like, I don't mind that umpires still exist to do that job, because the strike zone does not necessarily need to be a very hard box. It has always been fluid for the most part, you know, and for the great majority of time, and in the great majority of games you will see, the umpire will call a regulation strike zone. I think part of this too, I think, is instead of an automated ball and strike system, what I kind of prefer here is just that there's more accountability for umpires for when those kinds of calls happen, or for umpires who are consistently worse at other umpires than calling balls and strikes, that those umpires don't work home plate as much, for example. You know, Angel Hernandez is a guy who is consistent. Angel has many, many problems as an umpire, but one of them is that he is a terrible balls and strikes guy. He routinely, during a game, will make at least one call where you just throw your hands up and go, what are you looking at? And yet he keeps working. Not only does he keep working, he's been working for quite a long time. And that's also true of guys like C.B. Buckner or Laz Diaz. Like, all the bad umpires you can name, for the great majority of them, they call pretty rough ball and strike zones. But they keep working. You know, I appreciate, and I think maybe there is something to be said about, I don't know, I don't really like the idea of challenging balls and strikes either, because, I mean, part of the game forever has been, if you argue balls and strikes, you get thrown out. I know this is technically different, but I don't know, I like that part of the game. I like that there's that weird friction of it. If you want to make a version of the game that's more accurate, fine. That's, I guess, a thing that is, you know, that's something that is good to aim for. Part of me kind of feels like MLB wants an automated balls and strike zone because they don't want to deal with the umpires anymore. And in particular, they know how strong the umpires union is, and maybe they figure this is a good way to get rid of some people they don't like. But I'm particularly cynical about MLB when it comes to this stuff anyway, which, like I said, teams should be pissed about this, because an automated ball and strike, we don't know how accurate that thing is when it comes to balls and strikes. We don't know how well that's going to work. How well are you going to be able to trust walk rates, for example, for pitchers in AAA next season, knowing that an umpire is not, or knowing that the automated ball and strike system is in play, and no one has actually studied what the effects of that have been? I mean, I think this has been the case for a lot of what MLB has done under Rob Manfred. Is kind of, obviously the Atlantic League has been used as a guinea pig, which I think is honestly kind of just disgraceful. The Atlantic League is not supposed to be a science league. It is independent league baseball. It is its own thing. But it's also been the case with the low minors and now into the high minors, stuff where I understand there's no baseball testing laboratory. You know, it's not like there's a test kitchen like a Bon Appetit or something where you cook up strike zone rules. But, like, there has to be a way to try to figure, like, instead of using actual games that matter, or at least in the sense of, you know, this stuff matters for organizations, is how guys do in AAA. That still matters. Like, that ability to, like, or messing with that really to any degree, and I think automatic balls and strikes invariably are going to mess with that to a certain degree, just strikes me as rather unfriendly to the product itself. But I don't know. For me
also
personally,
doesn't mean so for the folks who think it like this is coming soon to Major League Baseball. That's
it's
not what
not.
this means.
No, because this has to be collectively bargained, and the
Yeah.
Players Association has made a lot of noise in the past that they are not, and the players especially, that they are not particularly interested in this becoming a thing, and understandably so. Pitchers don't want it, and it would put a lot of really good defensive catchers, if not
That's what
out
I was
of it.
also going to say. Like framing's out the door. With
Frame,
this.
yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of guys whose careers have been extended or whose careers have been essentially created through being really good pitch framers, which is something that catching has rewarded and determined to be useful to the job since the literal creation of both the position and the strike zone. All of a sudden, that's not going to be an asset. Catchers are essentially going to be. Well, I don't want to speculate to what catchers are going to turn into. It'd be really funny if we were just, all right, now everyone is going to be Jorge Alfaro. It's just going to be the biggest, nastiest arm you can get behind the plate, especially given that all the rule changes coming that should make stolen bases a little easier to attempt and succeed at this coming season. I do wonder if that combination of stuff means we're just going to start getting like Pudge Rodriguez cannon arm dudes again, which, cool. But at the same time, like, again, all of this stuff has an impact. It all ripples out in a way that I don't really know that Manfred and company think about or care about as much as I feel like the commissioner of baseball should. That
They don't care as much about the minor leagues and the A-ball, the Atlantic League.
I know Rob Manfred doesn't care about the minor leagues. He got rid of like half of them. Like it's obvious to me that he considers the minor leagues the same way that every other Major League Baseball commissioner is considered the minor leagues, which is to say a cheap source of disposable products. Like he
and if
does
we
not
screw it
care.
up for a year, who cares?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's illegitimate anyway. Only like 5,000 people come to watch these games, and they're in small communities that we don't care about anyway.
Yeah.
Regardless, I just find it strange to a certain degree that stuff like this gets rolled. It just seems to get rolled through pretty quickly, it feels like, and that it doesn't really seem like all the potential. I know that everything is going to, the only way to figure out how something works is to actually try to use it, but it does feel like when this stuff comes into play and when it comes into use, there are a lot more questions than there are seemingly answers as to how this is all supposed to work. And I think automated balls and strikes is one of those things where there are still a lot of questions. AAA will answer some of them, but I think it's also going to create a whole bunch of new ones that we're not really going to have any idea how to answer either. And most important for me is going to be, how does this actually affect the sport of baseball? How does this affect the game that gets played on the field? We don't know, and it's going to be
Here's the biggest
at least
problem,
interesting
John,
to find
right?
out, I guess.
So for 18 years, kids are just going to play without this, right? Like you're going to learn to pitch with because there's no robo umps in Little League. There's no
and there never will be. Like that's not a
Right.
thing that Little League in particular.
Or even travel ball. High
Although I
school
do think
ball,
the
like,
idea is kind of funny that like just get it for like Little League and like high school baseball, so that instead of an umpire getting death threats screamed at them from the overzealous like parents in the crowd, they can just like go hit a robot with a stick. That would at least just be funnier. You know?
Also, I mean, this is funny that this is a part of this, but like for me, I mean, I go to a lot of games anyway. I'm back in Atlanta, went to a lot of Braves games, and now here in Knoxville, going to a lot of Tennessee baseball games where it's like part of the appeal, part of the fun is just you not being the person, because I'm not that guy, but having those guys at these games who are like just screaming at these
those dudes are so bad. They're
but
like,
it's part of the
I understand
appeal
it's
of
part of-
baseball. You want those guys where you're like, that's someone's dad.
Well, look,
who's
it's
just
like
screaming.
It's like people have been saying the whole Greg Berhalter, Claudio Reyna thing over his son. Like the fact that this like nasty toxic drama has emerged because of like essentially a parent being mad that their kid didn't play enough is the most American soccer and like parent kid sport culture thing imaginable. So yes, I understand it's like part of it. It is just kind of a bummer though. I feel like it's such a bummer for those umpires to have to deal with those jackasses and be like, "What do you want?
Like it, though.
I'm
like,
doing
if you
this
talk
for
to them,
no
some of
money."
them want that. They want the smoke. It kind of like gets them energized. So I think some get energized from getting.
It's like that story about Pete Weber, the "Who do you think you are? I am," and the fact that it was directed at a 13-year-old in the crowd who had pissed him off. It's like, I get that. Some people just need that. They need that just fire behind their head. That's basically Max Scherzer, I imagine. Or
you think this is bad? All right, here, watch the strike zone now. You're upset now. Like here we go.
I am so excited. I don't know if it's going to happen before he retires, but if it, I almost want it to happen before he retires because I want to see Max Scherzer deal with a robot strike zone.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see his reaction to that because I want to see someone lose it at a machine, essentially. Like but like again, I mean, if I were the commissioner of baseball personally, this would not be a priority for me. But I would, again, my priority would be, let's just get more accountability for the actual umpires themselves. Let's promote good umpires and get rid of the bad umpires as much as we can, as much as we can bargain with the union. And I understand that the umpires union is essentially a police union. Like, there's fundamentally no difference between the two of them. Like, they represent a group of people who do not want their authority challenged and who do not want to give up the status they have achieved and believe that they have earned within the game. The ability that they have to, I imagine, keep MLB from getting rid of guys like Angel Hernandez or CB Buckner is probably substantial, but at the same time, it doesn't. At the very least, the process by which this stuff happens feels like it could be more transparent,
Yeah.
Or that there could be some level of public accountability. Maybe it's something like, I mean, I don't know how useful it is, but like the NBA last 2 minutes thing where the refs go through and be like, all right, we missed that, we missed that, we missed that, we missed that. And like, I know on the one hand, it's like, well, it doesn't really feel great to hear a ref admit, yeah, I just straight up missed that call. But I think it should also probably help, on the one hand, again, with the accountability and the transparency and the idea, like, and also with the idea, like, look, these guys are human just like you try doing this, it's not easy. Like, that's, is that something that we need to get rid of with the automated strike zone? I don't know, but I guess there's also the fact that umpires are still going to be a part of the game with the automated strike zone anyway. We'll just have to see. But I do find it just, the pace by which MLB does this stuff and the fervor that they have for it is just kind of strange sometimes, or at least notable. Speaking
of strange, the Dodgers are currently over the tax because they traded for Miguel Rojas this last week, John. They're going to have to do something else to get back under, and they still have time to do so. I don't know. Like, what do you make of Rojas? Do you think they're done? Do you think they ship somebody else out? Like, how does this work now?
Dude, staring at the Dodgers roster right now is like trying to do an algebra problem. It just like makes my head hurt. It reminds me of being in high school math and just being like, man, this is not going well for me in my brain. Like,
yeah,
trying to organize how that infield works now, where it feels like every person has to play at least two positions, and sometimes it feels like, I'm not sure if Chris Taylor has to play second and left at the same time. But I'm starting, like, based on the way the roster looks, I'm kind of wondering if that's what the Dodgers are thinking, that he will just kind of run between the two, between every pitch or something, depending on what they want to do.
Yeah.
But, no, the Rojas trade, I get for the Dodgers in the sense that if they really are committed to Gavin Lux as being a shortstop, and given the fact
certainly
that
feels that way.
It definitely feels that way, given that they let Trey Turner walk and seem to have no interest in anybody else to do that job, then I think it makes sense given how little Lux has played at shortstop, and that defensively that, he has graded out well at second base, and I think most people agree, or at least the consensus is, shortstop defensively, he's probably something closer to average. I think Rojas is there in case Lux, one, turns out to be significantly below average defensively, and he is not a tenable starter there, because if nothing else, you can stick Rojas at shortstop for 140 plus games a season and feel pretty good that defensively everything will go smoothly. He's a very good defensive shortstop. He has at least that going for him. He's also very cheap. Although, as you know, it takes him over the tax, which that's a whole issue. But at least for how he fits on the roster, I think he makes the most sense as the short side of a platoon with Lux and essentially the break in case of glass, or not break in case of glass, but the veteran backup insurance that I imagine Dave Roberts probably wanted to go along with, yeah, I'll put Gavin Lux at shortstop, but you need to give me someone who can actually play shortstop. What confuses me a little is that in order to get Rojas, the Dodgers gave up Jacob Amaya, whose profile is basically Miguel Rojas, but younger and with a better offensive ceiling. I guess maybe, again, if you're Dave Roberts, you don't want the backup to your, 26-year-old non-full-time shortstop to be a 24-year-old guy who was below league average offensively in AAA. Again, Rojas makes sense in that capacity, but so would have signing Elvis Andrus. Why? I guess I don't particularly understand what about Rojas is the most appealing beyond, again, he's relatively cheap, but so is Elvis. Anyway, I think what happened with the Dodgers more generally, though, is a few things. I think one, the Trevor Bauer suspension being reduced and effectively ended, and thus his salary going back onto the luxury tax calculation for 2023. I don't think they were. I think they thought that was a possibility. I don't know that they were actively planning for it or that they were actively expecting it. I think that caught them to surprise by a degree because I think you could see that they had potentially built in the space because Bauer effectively took them from under the threshold to basically right at it / slightly over. They had very clearly, I think, tried to leave some space in there, but I think at the same time they figured they would have had more time to try to figure out what to do with him to get rid of that financial burden in another sense, perhaps, maybe try to work out a trade, some kind of I don't know, but with that in mind, the Rojas thing, like you said, is just confusing from a luxury tax perspective because it really does seem like the entire point of this offseason for the Dodgers was get back under the luxury tax threshold, reset the penalties so that next offseason when Ohtani becomes a free agent, we can, yes, we're going to go back over the luxury tax threshold, but it'll be for Shohei Ohtani, someone we like more than... And I guess the other part of this is, of this free agent class this offseason, who were the Dodgers going to give that big money deal to? Signing Aaron Judge would have meant moving Mookie Betts to second base. I think you could probably make an argument that, well, you don't have Walker Buehler for a season, so go sign Justin Verlander if you can. I don't know. Maybe Verlander didn't want to go there, or maybe they just felt like they liked their pitching options better than what was out there. And in terms of the other position players available, if they didn't want to bring Turner back, I don't know that it would have made sense to go after any of the other shortstops except potentially Correa. And as we've seen with Correa, that just would have turned into its own silly mess anyway. And the rest of the free agent market was pretty thin, with the exception of like Wilson Contreras and Jose Abreu. And the Dodgers don't need help at catcher at first base. I think there probably could have been maybe a little more activity when it came to the outfield. Again, like Chris Taylor and James Outman and Trace Thompson are playing very large roles in those depth charts, and I don't really understand why that's the case. I wonder if a lot of this has been LA just kind of waiting for example, Pittsburgh to lower its asking price on Brian Reynolds. I do wonder.
No, hands off. That's Braves.
And that's the thing. I do wonder if a lot of these teams that kind of sat out the outfield free agent market, or at least didn't find anything to their liking, have now just been wondering and waiting. Like, okay, well, when are the Pirates going to crack on Reynolds? Or when is a team like St. Louis, for example, are they really going to hang on to all of Lars Nootbaar and Tyler O'Neill and Dylan Carlson and and Juan Yepez and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there are probably some teams trying to see like what other teams are going to do if they have roster crunches elsewhere. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Dodgers are doing that. And to a certain degree, they did that with Miami. Miami didn't really have room for Miguel Rojas this year. So they figured,
you have to start Joey Wendell at shortstop. What else are you
have to. And I think Miami's obviously going to do more, but Miami made it pretty clear that Miguel Rojas was not a part of its future. And essentially that's LA buying him for a prospect. Again, I don't know that I wouldn't have just rather taken Elvis Andrus, especially if they're both going to cost roughly the same and take you back over the tax anyway. But we'll see. I think ultimately...
What do you think they're starting at opening day outfield?
I could count on Mookie Betts in right field. I think it's going to depend...
Is Jason Hayward going to get an opening day start in center?
That's the thing. I think what the Dodgers have done for themselves for this season is... I think they're still going to be good because it's... this team still has a really good top half of the lineup. It still has a really good starting rotation. It still has a good bullpen. Guys like
top
Max,
end talent is still
it's still incredibly good.
Yes.
And guys like Chris Taylor and Max Muncy, for as much as they are not perfect and they are not ideal for the roles necessarily they have, are still good ball players. Yeah. And I think part of what makes this Dodgers team kind of feel so off is that normally everyone is kind of in their perfect place, and this Dodgers team feels a lot more scrambling and
kind
stretching,
of Razy, right? Like more Razy Andrew Friedman than Dodgers.
It feels more Rays than Dodgers, I think, and Rays and not Rays in a good way.
No,
but I think the other thing about the Dodgers is there's a feeling, I think, of guys or guys down in the prospects in their system getting a kind of newer wave of talent. So I think and those guys potentially playing a role next season. So I think what you could see with the Dodgers is I don't think we're going to see them being that same kind of 105 plus win team. I think they're still going to be good. I just think the error bars are going to be bigger in terms of where they ultimately end up in terms of wins. I think it's far more likely you could see a Dodgers team that dips maybe even down into like the low to mid 90s in wins if stuff doesn't come together. But if it does, it's a team that should be around the 100-win territory anyway, just probably not with the same kind of high-end capacity the previous Dodgers teams did, barring obviously a trade between now and, well, I guess the end of the season.
I would also just do the middle finger and sign Jurickson Profar to add to this Padres Dodgers.
Yeah, I like the idea of signing Profar because I like the idea of the Dodgers building a roster where everyone can play 4 different positions.
Yeah.
Just the whole team is just constantly switching positions during innings. I am amazed the Rays have never done that.
Like, why are the Padres not signing Profar? Their starting left fielder, baseball started today, is like, what, Matt Carpenter?
It's weird how San Diego is both like in a position where it's like they have all this incredible talent, but then it really has this feel of, yo, this better work this year, and it's not even guaranteed it's going to work this year.
Yeah.
I know I know we wanted to talk about. Am I stepping on your Padres segue now? Was that what you wanted to talk about next?
That was just something I was thinking about with Profar, just sitting out there where I'm like, we can. This is a natural, seamless transition, John. We can go Padres here.
Yes, because this is something when I was looking at the Padres roster when you brought up whether or not they should go after Ohtani next season, which, I mean, let me just get it right. Let me just say it obviously. Yes, you should go after Ohtani, but the Padres' problem is going to be twofold. One is that they are going to have to choose between Ohtani and Juan Soto, or not Ohtani and Juan Soto, between Ohtani essentially and Manny Machado and or potentially the ability to give Juan Soto an extension in the 2020, anytime between now and the end of 2024 when he becomes a free agent. Mm-hmm. The other issue is that when you look at the Padres roster, just in terms of what they are doing financially, oh my God, they have some issues that they're going to run into with next year's team. Mm-hmm. Here is everyone who is set to be a free agent after the 2023 season in San Diego. Mm-hmm. Manny Machado, if he opts out of the last 5 years of his contract, which I think he would be insane not to do. Mm-hmm. Yu Darvish, Blake Snell, Drew Pomeranz, Josh Hader. Just those 5 guys alone are all stepping away. Plus, you're going to have Juan Soto, who's made $23 million, or who's going to make $23 million this year. He is going to the last year of arbitration. If they don't agree to a long-term deal with him before then, he's going to cost at least $30 to $35 million for one single year of play, as is deserved. Mm-hmm. Like, this team already and even with those guys leaving, this team already has a projected payroll somewhere in the neighborhood of like $150 million for next year just in guaranteed money. You know, they're going to spend $240 to $250 million this year just on this team. So one way of looking at it is $100 million in salary is going to come off the books. The other way of looking at it is that was $100 million in salary you were paying to Manny Machado, Yu Darvish, Blake Snell, and Josh Hader. 4 guys that are not particularly easily replaceable, particularly given how San Diego has ransacked its farm system in the last few years to make all of this happen.
Which this again, is positive. These are
positive. Yes, these are. Yes. None of this is to be construed as a critique of the Padres.
Yeah,
like things have not worked out perfectly for them, but that's baseball. Things don't work out perfectly for anybody. Every team has to deal with issues. And while I don't necessarily think AJ Preller is the straightest shooter when it comes to being a tradesman, I do admire his absolute bona fide lunacy chaos and what he does. Like, Padres going for it is a good thing. This is just to note that this is a very risky, or not very risky necessarily, but this is a big gamble they have taken where they're already going to have to start paying the piper in a sense this next offseason. Because they're going to have to start making those choices of, if we want to go after Ohtani, that means all 4 of those guys that are walking, that are going to be presumably huge contributors to this 2023 Padres team, none of them are coming back. And that may have been the plan already, given that Darvish and Machado are both above 30. Snell is getting there, and Hader is a closer. But that also means, okay, we add Ohtani. What else can we really do? Because this payroll is already $150 million. And does that also impact our ability to keep the guy we traded essentially our entire farm system for in Juan Soto? You know, these are very difficult choices the Padres are going to have to make over the next few years. So, I mean, I think they obviously will go after Ohtani because, as Preller proved with the Bogarts, Judge, and who else are they trying to go after? Trey Turner contract offers. He just is happy to spend. He's happy to spend other people's money if he thinks he can put together the best team possible with it. So I have no doubt that the Padres will be involved in Ohtani. I also have no doubt that they will be probably one of the finalists for him because of the combination of location and how good they are. But that's going to be a really tough decision for San Diego as to what it wants to do going forward and how it wants to manage the possibility of an Ohtani future if that cuts out the possibility of a Soto future, to say nothing of what happens with, again, Machado and Darvish and Snell and Hader and everybody else on that team that's about to start getting more expensive or that's going to hit free agency soon.
Yeah, I also they have this not wild card, I guess, just golden ticket in their back pocket, which is the Fernando Tatis situation, where it's
I'm amazed that I went through that entire thing without mentioning Fernando Tatis Jr. because it somehow shouldn't be possible. But on the other hand, yeah, because that's another guy they owe a staggering amount of money to going forward. And Bogarts, I think, will be making a collective like $50 million for the next 10 years in San Diego.
And a lot of it's hard to forecast with them because I think how they operate with Machado and guys like that next winter is just, how does the season go? Do they win? Do they get to the World Series and lose? Do they flame out and get beaten in the wild card round? Like, it really just, I think a lot of what happens with San Diego, we can't really forecast until the next postseason, because I think there is so much question.
This team is built for two things: to win the division and then to win the World Series. And so if you want to assign a corollary of a season is successful only if a team, or this season would be a success of the Padres only if they win the World Series, I think that's, and I mean, I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but I think for me, it's if this team does not win the World Series this year, the path to do so is going to become much harder from 2024 going forward because of the fact that this roster is going to have to change significantly, at the very least, in the fact that presumably, again, none of Machado, Darvish, Snell, or Hader are going to be coming back to this team past 2023. And the Padres will obviously do something to replace them and try to manage around that.
Offseason, right? Like, how many guys, Will Myers and company, like, if you go up it from last year's roster to now, there's a bunch of turnover quietly in San Diego.
But the thing is, I think a lot of the turnover in San Diego so far has been kind of getting rid of the pieces that haven't worked. That upcoming quartet, I think, is one of the first times in this Preller era that we've really seen they're going to lose guys who matter.
Yeah.
And who really have an impact on how things work here. Machado was a fantastic signing for San Diego, even if they don't win the World Series.
He started
with him
all
as
this
a
in a
Padre.
way.
He made this all happen, I think.
Yeah.
So for me, I think, I think this Padres team is built to try to win the World Series, obviously. I think it would be very disappointing for them if they did not, and I think it will also get much harder for them to win one, at least in the next... We'll see, but like, if nothing else...
They could win it this year.
They could. I think they very well could. I think they'll be one of the favorites. I think they probably should be favored to win the division at this point because, again, that Dodgers team has a lot more volatility than Dodgers teams of recent years. You cannot just pencil them in for 103 plus wins and then kind of go, all right, let's go on with the rest of it.
The NL postseason is going to be a bloodbath, John. Like,
it's going to be so much fun.
Mets, Cardinals, Padres, and Dodgers.
Is this what it's like being an NBA fan where you just kind of spend the regular season waiting for the postseason?
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of a bummer. I mean, there are many things I like about the regular season that I look forward to, but yes,
postseason baseball is different too. Postseason baseball is even better than NBA.
It's thinking about all these really good teams that are built to do exactly one thing, and that's to win a championship. Actually, get to that point. That's just fun. Because a lot of these teams are built to be regular season dominant too. Like the Padres are going to win if everyone stays healthy and things go right. The Padres will win 95 plus games. Like they will be a very, very good team. But it's just, again, it's wanting to see, how is that going to shake out between the Mets, the Braves, the Phillies, the Padres, the Dodgers, the
Cardinals.
The Cardinals.
Hey, they might be trading for Pablo Lopez this week.
I mean, sure. Why not? I think that would be a good move for them. I think if you're the Cardinals, you can never have enough pitch. That feels like the most Midwestern maxim of baseball. You can never have enough pitching because that is the way the Cardinals have operated since, I think, every year I've been alive. That's been the case. And I see no reason why that would stop. Because if it does stop, then the ghost of...
They're like the Dave Ramsey of Major League Baseball.
No, I was going to say the ghost of Red Schoendice will come out and just and leave blood, just emit blood-curdling screams while wandering around the outfield or something. Whitey Herzog will come back to life and strangle John Mozeliak if the Cardinals are not pitching forward going forward. Is Whitey Herzog's dead, right?
Yeah.
I didn't just
right?
invent that.
Okay,
Yeah.
what? I feel like he has to.
Yeah, that feels.
There's no way.
There's no way, right?
He lived
Oh my
91
God.
years.
Yeah, I was gonna say when I saw
Hold on,
90.
he's alive.
No, he is alive. I thought Whitey Herzog died like 25 years ago.
Killed Whitey.
Oh no! If he dies tomorrow, I'm gonna feel so bad. Oh no! I hope I didn't just kill Whitey Herzog. Oh well. Either way, the currently still alive Whitey Herzog would have some very cross words for the Cardinals if they did not go pitching forward.
Oh my God.
Oh boy! And I gotta make sure Reg Schoendienst is dead too. Or no? Okay, his photo's black and white. I think I feel pretty good about that one. If your photo's in black and white on Google, you're not still alive.
Incredible.
Oh, okay. But he only died like 4 years ago, so... What is it about being on the Cardinals that apparently makes you immortal? Everyone associated with that franchise apparently lives forever.
When you get the best fans in baseball, you just get a little bit. They give you a little bit of their.
Do you know how insane it is to have been an MLB manager in like the 70s or the 80s and not be dead? Those guys smoked like 5 packs a day. They ate nothing but cheeseburgers for 7 months straight. They drank all night. None of them ever exercised.
It's the Keith Richards situation where you're like, I don't understand how this man is on this planet for another year. Some people are just built for it.
I feel like the life expectancy for 80s managers should have been similar to like 60s rock musicians,
Yeah.
where it's like, that lifestyle will kill you in like 10 years. And yet here's Whitey in 91. The fact that Jim Leland is still alive, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The fact that Jim Leland is still alive
yes.
is a miracle. That dude has been ripping Marlboros for like
He eats
5
them
decades.
for breakfast. Like that man has been. He like crunches them up a little bit, and then he puts a little at the end. They're like, "Do you want any room for creamer?" And he's like, "No, room for ash."
No,
And
just
that's
room
it.
for ash. Mm-hmm. Okay, here's the one that I had to look this up because I knew it was Jack McKeon is still alive.
Yeah.
Papa Jack still being alive that's unreal, man. Again, apparently if you were a manager in the 80s, apparently you became immortal.
Yeah.
Like that's how are those 4 guys still alive?
Smoke up, guys.
Or not, or Sean Dice is dead, but how are those 3 guys still alive? Yeah, that's the lesson. Smoke. Light them up.
Apologies to future sponsors from the Medical Association.
Yeah, I'm
but-
sorry to the American Lung Association, your newest sponsor. But Jim Leland is here to say, kids, light them up and light them up often, and you'll live to be however old Jim Leland is, which is, I think, somewhere between 85 and 200. 78. Oh, my God.
He's looked 78 for a
Jim,
long
wow,
time.
Jim Leland is an age where if he died, people would go, oh, he wasn't that old.
No. But what is Jack McKeon? He's got to be pushing.
Jack
90.
McKeon's 92. Like, Jack
Okay.
McKeon is at an age where when he dies, people are going to go, he was still alive?
Yeah. Shout out to Jack McKeon.
Yeah,
What is
shout
Lou
out to
Piniella
Papa
now?
Jack, man. Shout out to Trader Jack.
Lou is 79.
Yeah,
looking
I mean, Lou
79.
Pinella's a hard 79, though.
Yeah.
Like, all that rage has definitely aged him an extra 5 to 8 years.
Joe Torre, 82.
Joe Torre looks every inch 82. I like how this has now just turned into me just bad-mouthing senior citizens and Hall of Famers. Well, Lou isn't a Hall of Famer. I can't stop. I'm dumping all over the guys.
Wait, Lou's
This
is
is
he
sad.
not a Hall of Famer? Do we not think
No,
so?
Lou Pinella's not a Hall of Famer. He's been on the committee ballots a few
Well, I'm saying
times, but
like
he's never
for
made
us,
it.
is he? Can we say he's like? I mean, he's a great manager all time.
Yeah, he had a 500 winning percentage.
Is it only 500?
517 to be exact.
Dang.
Yeah,
thought it'd be
Lou
better
was
than that.
fine, but Lou was nothing special. He
You know
just
what it is?
he
It's just a name.
occupied he
You know what
occupied
it
a
is?
special.
Lou
and he
Piniella
also-
is a cool name.
Well, it's also because he occupied a special place in our heart as the irascible dude who would like scream at umpires and
Yeah.
throw bases and stuff. That stuff will always get you far, at least when it comes to positive press.
True.
Also, he was willing to give quotes, which always also helps.
Also good. More of a head scratcher, Jon Tayler. The Orioles or Marlins off season for you?
I think they're both weird, but I understand the Orioles one less, even though I understand why they are not doing what they're doing. And I think it's similar because for the Marlins, I figured this was going to be the case because the Marlins are cheap.
Yeah.
And we have yet to see any indication that that's changed or changing. Like, I think to a certain degree, you could, if you looked at it from a certain angle, the Avisail Garcia and Jorge Soler signings were like, oh, okay, well, they're they're at least doing something. They're trying. They're giving some money out. It's like, no, those are the contracts cheap teams hand out. Because they don't cost as much in their short term. And if they don't work, okay. But at the same time, I think you can also see that because those two deals in particular didn't work, you could almost predict that Miami was going to go, I don't know that we really want to spend that much more this offseason. We've already got these
Kim
two.
Ng, what are you doing? This is it. Like, if you don't win, you're out the door.
I mean, ostensibly, I would imagine, but and that's not to say, I liked some of the things Miami has done this offseason. I like Johnny Cueto. I think he's exactly the kind of guy you add to that rotation, and I just love the idea, too, of him pitching in Miami on a regular basis. I need to see him pitch at least one game while wearing, a big, loud, buttoned shirt.
He should be allowed to pitch
or
on
with
a
a Panama
horse for
hat.
one game, too, by the way.
Yes, they should just do Johnny. Every day he starts should just be some different theme of Johnny Cueto Day.
I like that.
I like signing Gene Segura, although I don't love him playing third base.
What's the infield? Who's starting where?
Well, Jazz Chisholm, if he's healthy, is a second baseman. Wendell's at third, and then you have Wendell's at short, Segura's at third, and then you have Garrett Cooper, I would guess, at first base. I mean, I still like, for as much as I don't like the Rojas trade for Miami in that it kind of messes their infield up a little, I do like, I think, if a team's going to offer you a top 15 prospect within its system who essentially profiles as the guy you just traded, but younger and somehow even cheaper, and also probably a better hitter, I think you should do that trade 10 times out of 10. That deal made sense to me from a long-term view. It's just everything in Miami just seems to be done with a view of maybe in 2 or 3 years this will work out, but if it doesn't, well, maybe 2 or 3 years after that. There is no urgency to do anything in the present.
Look at the NL East, man. The Braves and Mets are going to gobble up wins in this division, and the Phillies broke through last year. Where do you think the wins are coming if you don't make just gigantic swings this offseason?
But that's the thing. That's why it didn't surprise me what Miami didn't do, even though it doesn't really make sense given their context, because they just don't have the ownership that wants to spend. Again, Bruce Sherman did not have enough money to buy this team. That ownership group took on a whole ton of debt to do this. They are leveraged to the eyeballs, which is something that MLB really should not have allowed, but given how desperate they were to get rid of Jeffrey Loria and happy about the idea of Derek Jeter being the face of a franchise, or another one at least, I'm sure that they kind of just made that all go away. Now it has turned out to be not so good because that ownership group very clearly does not want to spend the amount of money necessary to make that team better.
Something Derek Jeter recently learned and was like, all right, I'm out.
And again, that's what I've said. I fully believe Jeter left because the ownership group said, we're not going to spend the way you think we should spend, because I'm sure Jeter was telling them, why are we not signing big free agents? Why are we not making trades for these guys? How do you think this roster is going to get better if all you rely on is a farm system?
Yeah.
That's all that Miami is doing, is just, it's essentially the equivalent of rolling dice and just hoping you hit whatever a good I've never played craps. Does it show?
I've never either.
So whatever a good roll in craps is, it just feels like that's what Miami's doing and just hoping that the dice come up that way. And if they don't, well, it's not like, and they're also only placing $10 bets. They're not even going that hard in, but their strategy is super limited anyway.
Yeah.
No, Miami's just a bad gambler, apparently. For the Orioles, it's more surprising, I think, because the proof of concept is now there that what they are doing is working and can work and should work. And I think that's the moment when you have to start making that jump into, I think they are at the point where, to give the most recent example, the 2015 Cubs were, or the 2014 Astros, where you were finally seeing, oh, hey, this is actually they're actually starting to figure some stuff out here. This is going to be good now. And, which is not to say that the Orioles will necessarily turn into that, but I do find it a little weird that with what they saw last year, where they were like, oh, this team's actually better than we expected, that wasn't used as the jumping off point to, well, then let's go ahead and start investing more in it, and instead was, well, we're ahead of schedule, so we're just not going to spend anyway, and we're going to wait to do the spending. And look, I don't know with regards to the Orioles offseason, what they really could have done in terms of their ability to spend with, Aaron Judge wasn't going to go to the Orioles. Carlos Rodon was probably not going to go to the Orioles. Justin Verlander was probably not going to go to the Orioles. Trey Turner, I don't necessarily know that there were too many guys who made sense for them given given how the market shook out. But I also do find it weird that there wasn't more of an attempt to add pitching, for example.
Yeah.
That they weren't a team that was really in on Nathan Eovaldi or Andrew Heaney or maybe even a step above Heaney or a guy, I think, Jameson Taillon ending up on the Cubs, why not the Orioles? And I don't even think Jameson Taillon is that great shakes, but I think he's he is something kind of dependable and relatively durable, that the Orioles rotation, even with how much better it performed than I think people expected last year, still looks like a rotation where you're like, I really would like one more good arm here. You know, obviously Rodon would have been perfect for that team. I just get the sense that he really wanted to go to New York ultimately at the end of the day. But I don't know. It also just doesn't make you feel great about what the Orioles might be planning or thinking, that they saw this offseason and didn't immediately sort of like jump in and be like, all right, let's start making these moves. Let's start bringing these guys in. And instead we're like, well, I guess we'll wait till next year and see how this year goes. And because I think that's the other thing. I think if this Orioles team underperforms relative to expectations, I think if we see an Orioles team that finishes last in the division, for example, or that fails to go 500 or that doesn't contend for the playoffs, I do wonder if the message after that is going to be, see, they weren't ready yet. Yeah. They still need time. That's why we didn't spend. But I worry that just becomes, like in Miami, a perpetually moving target. Right. You know, where it's like it just justifies never spending because you're always like, well, we don't know if they're ready. It's like, yeah, because you need to add more to get them to a better place. Like, this Baltimore team as it stands now looks pretty good, but is probably not going to be a team that wins more than like somewhere in the mid 80s where it currently stands. I think it still needs more.
But they could have done it. Like, they could have gotten closer.
They could have gotten closer. I agree. I think at the very least they should have been more. I think they should have been in on one of those 4 shortstops. I think that would have made a lot of sense for them.
Why aren't they trading for Pablo Lopez?
Or something like that. They have a farm system that I think has finally started to bear some fruit. And now is the time, I think, when you have to start figuring out, okay, which of these guys are going to take the next step and which of these guys can we move for help that we can use. And Lopez is a great example because he's not just help right now. He's help long term. He's not expensive. He's not an older guy. You know, this wouldn't be the equivalent of trading for like Justin Verlander or something. Yeah. This would just be getting a guy who helps your rotation and who'll probably help it for a few years down the road if all you do is give him a pretty good sized mid-career contract extension. You know?
Can I tell you what I'd do for them if I was Baltimore? I signed Greinke. They're
I don't want him facing the AL East. Oh my goodness, no.
I don't want him as a main starter. I want him as emergency number 6. But if there is a teacher and a guy, when you read about, remember that article on Greinke, like all of his teammates and like how beloved he was by just the starters in Texas and Houston, and I think there is value in guys like that. I mean, the Braves have that a little bit with Charlie Morton. I think
I know it's a veteran mentor thing. I just wonder, given that we've heard nothing, or not, I shouldn't say nothing about Greinke. I know Ken Rosenthal had a notebook piece recently that mentioned Greinke. I didn't read it, but I do wonder if Greinke is looking to retire though. If he's just kind of waiting to see how he feels before spring training starts, and whether or not the drive is still there, and whether or not he still wants to put his body through that, whether or not he still wants to put his body through a full season, no less.
He's going to do a bit when he retires, by the way.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he went to Kansas City with the intention in his mind of, I'll play one more season there, I'll see how it feels, and if that ends up being my last season, then at least I had it in Kansas City. At least my career came full circle, or whatever it happens to be, if that kind of thing matters to Zach Greinke, which the more I think about it, the more I'm not actually sure that would matter to Zach Greinke. But anyway, I mean, he signed in Kansas City for a reason. That team wasn't going anywhere. I think it was very clearly a sentimental type thing for him, as much as he can presumably get sentimental. But
what's the Ichiro quote in Kansas City?
Oh, that it's hotter in Kansas City than 2 rats fucking in a sock.
That's it. Wool sock. Wool sock. That's it.
Yeah. Ichiro, a fantastic quote when he felt like it. Not when he felt like it. When we got to hear from him, I should say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I understand the Orioles offseason less in that sense that to me it looked like this is the perfect opportunity to start moving toward the contention that you guys have been promising is going to show up for years. Like the team that we're going to talk
about last, John. The team that was like, we have these awesome young arms or young players. We have this awesome young lineup. We have this generational hitter and Vlad Guerrero Jr. We have Bo Bichette here. We're going to keep trying to win because guess what? It's going to be really hard to beat the Rays and the Yankees year over year.
And that is a team in Toronto that when those young guys started showing up, they were like, okay, then let's get George Springer. Let's get Kevin Gausman. Let's get now Chris Bassett. Rio even predated that. I think that was kind of like starting to get to bridge them to that point,
Get Brandon Belt this offseason.
Which I like for them.
Matt Chapman too, which was a big thing at the time.
Matt Chapman was a big trade. Like that team is consistently going for it in Toronto in a way that Baltimore, and I think you can argue Baltimore is not at where Toronto
They're close though, man.
But and you made the point already. They can get closer. It was not impossible for this Baltimore team to get better. I think the Baltimore teams of the last like 4 or so seasons before that, when they were truly abysmal, you looked at those rosters and went, well, there would be no point in you could add every major free agent to this roster and they probably still only win like 85 games. Like, it's just terrible all the way down. But once you've gotten to that point of like, oh, where this is actually a good functional probable core now. And sure, maybe I can understand the patience of like, oh, hey, Grayson Rodriguez isn't up yet. We don't have a full season out of Adley Rutschman or a full season out of Gunnar Henderson. Let's see what these guys look like before we start making all kinds of expensive long-term commitments to dudes who are much older, unless they had signed Correa, which I still think they really should have gone after Carlos Correa. But I can understand that, but I also think it's a very risk-averse strategy that also so conveniently happens to involve not spending money, which, given how the Angelos family seems to be operating right now, definitely seems to be one of their prime directives, is not spending money, which, for as much as you could say about Peter Angelos, he would spend the money to make the Orioles better. And I guess that's the thing, if you're an Orioles fan right now, like, how worried are you about the ownership situation and how this is all playing out? Because, I mean, I don't know if you saw or read about the the little exchange that John Angelos had with Dan Connolly of the Baltimore Sun, basically about how, to make it all the worse, it happened on Monday with Angelos basically trying to say, look, I'm here to talk about this Martin Luther King Jr. event. How disrespectful to talk about, the team ownership situation right now. And it's like, are you even from the area? And like, Connolly is from Baltimore for what it's worth. Like, just pulling the aggrieved, like, you can't expect me to talk about this stuff. Man, between that and the latest set of Bob Castellini, putting a shotgun directly against his foot and pulling the trigger multiple times, like, MLB owners are just such a gross, useless group of people.
And you're always like, well, what if they saw it? It's like, chances are it'd be worse than the person who was in charge before. Do
you realize how annoying and frustrating it is when we talk about teams like the Dodgers and the Padres to have to think about the money? That having to do actuarial tables is something that actually matters in baseball. And I understand why, because these guys have to be paid for their work. But at the same time, it's like the fact that these teams have these constraints that are essentially self-imposed because the people in charge have just decided you're only getting X percent of this, even though potentially only a little bit more might be the difference between this team winning something and this team not winning something. And which ostensibly would be the only binary that these people who own a sports team would care about. Like, if I owned a sports team, I wanted to win. What else am I owning it for? Which is all a much bigger thing about the transition of team from a symbol of civic pride and a civic institution with shared cultural values and involvement to a financial plaything for the idle rich. But that's a whole other much rantier podcast that I would recommend you get Craig Calcaterra on here to talk about.
I've tried. I would like to get Craig Calcaterra on this. His newsletter's fun. Go subscribe to it. Cup of coffee. Last thing, we talked about the Blue Jays a little bit. They are 6th in payroll as of right now. It's always funny to go to y'all's Fangraphs roster resource page for certain things where the Mets are just this now insane 2023 projected payroll, $350 million. Their 2026 commitments, $87 million. That's just bonkers.
Steve Cohen.
What are we doing?
I appreciate that the financial criminal Steve Cohen has no attachment to his money because he's just and again we talked about it. He's like the best case scenario for a billionaire owner, which is that they have no trouble spending money. The downside is those guys are all categorically insane. You're not getting a Mark Cuban. No one is getting a billionaire who's also not a flaming embarrassment in at least half a dozen different ways, or an actual registered felon like Steve Cohen, the financial criminal, or convicted felon, I should say.
The Blue Jays also signed Brandon Belt, Jon Tayler. Do they have the best lineup in the AL?
I think it's up there. I mean, I think the biggest contender for me, or the biggest obstacle standing in their way of claiming that what would be that number one spot would be Houston. That Houston lineup remains impeccable from top to bottom, and I think adding Jose Abreu and getting Michael Brantley back should be very, very beneficial. I obviously really like what Houston. Also, Houston has the best non-Aaron Judge hitter in the American League, who is Yordan Alvarez. So I think that's a really tough hill to crest. I think optimally functional, fully healthy Yankees lineup is very, very good, or has the potential at least to be very, very good. and that especially goes up if and when Anthony Volpe is ready to join that lineup. I think his offensive ceiling is very high, and I've said it before. I feel so much for that kid. The Yankees punted like 3 off seasons worth of shortstops.
No, there's no
Just
question
for
he
him.
has to be a big player this year. Like,
Yeah,
there's no
like
question.
I feel like the Yankees kit will be okay or should be fine if he doesn't end up contributing this season. But I
He
think
won't be because the Yankees fans will not let that go. If
But I think
Volpe is not awesome, that's
I
not
think
gonna
he
go
would be
well.
the difference between that team being good and being great if he shows
Yeah.
up and is the guy he's supposed to be. But regardless, I think those two teams are probably in that conversation. I think it's Houston right now. I think Toronto is right there though with the Yankees and with Boston's lineup for like 6 weeks out of the year is going to be great, and the rest of the year it's just going to make me want to tear my hair off. So we'll go with that. I think Seattle's, Seattle has that thing where every time I want to talk myself into them, particularly as an offense this year, I just stop halfway through and I remember, wait, they're starting a Jared Kelenic, AJ Pollock platoon in left field, and their DH is probably going to be a lot of like, I was going to say Adam Frazier, but he's not there anymore. It's not great in
Who
it's
will
not
be
great
their
in
DH?
Seattle. I think Toronto is up there. I think it's probably Houston. Toronto is the 1-2, if only because if it's not Toronto, you're betting on a healthy Yankees lineup, which is certainly not a thing.
Yeah.
You're betting on a really like 2013 style performance from a Boston lineup. You're betting on Cleveland somehow coming up with like 100 home runs out of nowhere, or you're betting on Seattle and Texas being essentially more than the sum of their parts because their parts just don't look very great in a lot of places. So I think it's still
Dalton
Houston,
Varsho, we haven't even mentioned. They traded for him.
I think he's a big hinge in that lineup because he's a guy who overperformed his peripherals last year and who, the contact peripherals at least have not really been a fan of the last couple of years. They think he's pretty much close to an average bat as opposed to an above average one, but yeah, I think.
think about this. Like, you got Vlad, Belt, Whit Merrifield, and Espinal at second. They'll probably split time.
Well, I don't know how much I expect Belt to play. Because for me in my mind, that lineup it's Vlad, it's Bichette, it's Springer, it's Kirk, and it's Chapman. Those are the 5 guys you feel very good about going into the season.
I think you should feel good about Varsho.
I think you feel okay about Varsho, and I think for the most part you feel okay about
Springer.
some combination of Espinal and Merrifield at second base.
Yeah.
But I think there's, as with every lineup, there are certainly some spots that I think are weaker than others, and there's certainly potential for things to go wrong, particularly if guys get hurt. This team doesn't have a lot of offensive depth, I think, to work with, and that's going to be a problem if for any team, losing a player of like Vlad Jr. would be very, very bad. But yeah, Toronto can't afford to lose those top 5 guys really for any extended period of time. And I think the guy you worry about the most in that group is Springer in that regard because he just has not been able to stay healthy the last few years.
Have we had a player play every position outside of catcher? Because I think Kevin Biggio has a chance to play at least one game of every position.
I'm really curious to see what they're going to do with him because
super utility. Like, whoever needs a day off, Kevin's like, I got you. Like, he's just going around the dugout.
I suppose.
Who's tired? Who's tired?
I just wonder because he has just not shown any ability to hit consistently throughout the major so far, and I wonder if that being the case, like if a super utility role isn't essentially bad for him because he just never gets consistent playing time at any one place or another. But
strong Johan Camargo vibes for him.
Yeah, but I'd be very curious to see what that's going to turn into for him. Or I'd be very curious, rather, to see what the Blue Jays are going to turn him into. Because I think you're right. I think they probably want to do some kind of super utility, but...
Yeah. I think he plays every single position outside like first this year. I think he gets a start at second, third, short, center, left, and right. I think he gets every start. Jon Tayler, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Fangraphs.com this week?
So a lot of, obviously, catching up after the holiday weekend, getting in on some of the smaller moves that have been made recently. We actually have a piece on Dalton Varsho coming out Wednesday morning. Dalton Varsho's Secret Superpower, it's called, by Ben Clemens. So I'll be interested.
That's going to be good.
That's going to be fun. Jay Jaffe is wrapping up, as I said last week, his Hall of Fame Jaws profiles. He'll have Mike Napoli out this week. Again, he's going through the guys on the ballot who will be one and done, who will be on this ballot, but probably almost certainly no future ones. But he wants to give a tip of the hat to everybody who appears because Jay's a completist like that. Similarly, is still running through our Zips projections. We got the Mariners coming out on Wednesday, so that's actually why when I was thinking about Seattle, I remembered looking at the graph or the graphic that Dan has that goes with that, looking at the positions, going, oh yeah, there are some not great issues with this team in particular, but. So we're mostly again just running through the off-season series and otherwise checking in on smaller stuff around the league. But as we get closer, obviously to the end of January, we'll have our Hall of Fame vote recap roundup. Jay will do that, and then also some forecasting for the next few Hall of Fame ballots. We'll have a team prospect list coming up by Eric Longenhagen as he continues scouting his way through Arizona. We'll have the rest of Dan's Zip series and eventually his 2023 Zips projections for the whole league. And obviously the big one, in about a month's time, close enough to it, we will be rolling out the top 100, our big prospect list for 2023. So come on over to Fangraphs, sign up for a membership. It's just $60 a year for ad-free browsing. You get a lot of cool perks. Come join Fangraphs. We're good.
There you go. Do that today. John, thank you as always, my friend. I greatly appreciate it. And I'll talk to you next week.